The Dream House by Craig Higginson. This is the 12th lesson for IEB Matric students, in which we continue with part 4 of the novel. We are in the falling action of the structure of the novel, which follows the traditional 5-act structure of dramatic plays. In today's section, we focus on the title of the novel, The Dream House. Pause for a moment and consider the 7 selected images on this slide. What are the houses or dwellings depicted on this slide? You should see a traditional KwaZulu-Natal farmhouse, a suburban Durban home, a traditional rondavel, village homes typical of the KZN Midlands, new estates or gated communities which have become very popular in South Africa. Also, think about the picture that shows a bilingual no entry sign. Pay particular attention to the depiction of dogs on that sign. Turn to page 170 in order to read Looksmart's point of view. We learn how Looksmart started at a humble rural school and loved learning. His teacher approached his mother about how he needed a more challenging environment. His mother approached Patricia. Looksmart knew of the relationship between Patricia and John Ford. At school, he might have anticipated favorable treatment from Ford, but the opposite occurred. Despite this, he did well at school and was a prefect too. Patricia asks him about his wife, Annabel, but he has no wish to discuss her with the old woman. Looksmart has had an affair with a white woman, but doesn't particularly like her. Only with his daughters does he feel unconditional and absolute love. Looksmart and Patricia discuss the plans for the new buildings. Initially, she had no wish to see them, but now that he's involved, she'd love to see them. He had at first conceived of this plan in hatred, in an attempt to obliterate his past. He's excited, telling her about the project, but not all of it sounds environmentally positive, as it involves the destruction of huts, the removal of wetlands for a trout farm, and the bird life will probably be chased away. But the house will remain and be transformed almost beyond recognition. Looksmart's return to Dwaleni challenges him to think about the way that he runs his life as an adult man. It appears that he considers himself unworthy. This passage should remind you of the definition of imposter syndrome, which we looked at in an earlier lesson. His relationship with the land is under scrutiny here. This is topical as we grapple with the complexities of land expropriation in South Africa today. Looksmart is building a gated community on Dwaleni. It's a popular housing concept in South Africa now. Beautiful estates with controlled access, allowing the residents to live in their safe bubbles of isolation. It's a siege mentality, a lager approach to living. Looksmart hopes to destroy Dwaleni's beauty, its rural serenity. Surprisingly, Patricia says she likes the idea of such an estate on her farm. You should, of course, think about the use of the word nightmares here, as opposed to dreams. We continue this encounter from Patricia's point of view. Turn to page 178. Patricia feels that Looksmart's dream house, even with all its changes, originated from her. She feels that this house is evidence of his connection to her. Despite all the degradation, something positive has emerged. He explains that he heard of the farm being up for sale and wanted to be involved in developing it. She longs to hear that he loved her as a mother figure, or more than his own mother. But it's unlikely that Looksmart will say these words now. From Patricia's perspective, Looksmart ought to be working on himself, developing and reducing or eliminating his self-loathing. He admits that by going to the private school, he grew away from his own mother. He feels that he never fitted in. Patricia is happy to hear that he is looking after his own mother. Patricia envisages herself in her seaside house, and it seems that she too won't entirely fit in there. Both Patricia and Looksmart are in darkness, emotionally and physically. She tries to express that she knows him, but this fails. He declares that South Africa is indeed a strange land, and while she longs for maternal connection, some sort of influence over him, that sort of relationship, says Looksmart, can have no place in the future of this country. On the next slide, you can follow the audio recording of this passage.
Patricia, page 178. It may be his dream house. This house transformed almost beyond recognition. But still it comes from her. Perhaps too much from her. Perhaps even today he's too attached to his pain. And all he's managing to do is reproduce it with slight variations all across the valley. But she can say none of this to him. Now that he's finally talking in a way she can recognize. She's not about to undermine his momentum or diminish whatever it is he wants to tell her. And in spite of what she said about the house being knocked down brick by brick, a part of her is also pleased by this evidence of his attachment to the house. Her house. Her father's house. It makes her feel that amongst all the degradation, something good might also have come out of it all. They were not for nothing. Her endeavors, her father's endeavors, a trace of their presence will remain here long after they are gone. And new houses will grow out of the earth where future generations might make a better job of things and find that they are happy. How did you come to be involved in all this? She says, wanting to keep him talking, keep him here, for after he has gone, there will be little to draw much comfort from. Oh, when the sale of the farm reached my ears, I wanted to make sure we would be involved in developing it. They both take a moment to ponder that word, smile at it. Well, I'm very pleased that it is you, she says, who'll be doing it, the development. He inclines his head, never seeming to her more familiar or more of a mystery. And by tomorrow, she adds, we will be gone. Yes. And you will be able to clear yourself of everything that's dead. This is more a provocation than a statement of fact. And he takes the bait like the bad fisherman he once was. Dead? He says, smiling, pensive. No, madam. Now that I'm here, I don't know. I feel different about all of this. For a moment, she thinks he's going to say he loved her. She wants this more than anything, to be told she was loved by him for a period. Perhaps she was loved by him even more than his own mother was. But even if this were true, it is, of course, impossible for him to declare it. Such expressions have never been their way. Oh, tell me what happened to your mother, she says. How's she keeping these days? Oh, she's good. Very well, in fact. She's been living with me for about 15 years now, in my garden cottage, there in my house in Johannesburg. Oh, that's very nice. She knows. She probably sounds slightly put out, but she's also pleased he's looking after his mother, at the very least. It became his habit towards the end of his schooling to be unkind about her and unkind to her. He seemed to be angry with his mother even before he was angry with Patricia. But Patricia never understood why. Was it safer to despise his mother first? Did he then resent Patricia because she had taught him to be ashamed of his mother? Oh, I'm pleased you're looking after her. Well, what else do you expect? He says, now the one to sound put out. Do you know she still grows her own vegetables in the back garden? Can you believe that? A crop of mealies in the middle of Orange Grove. I suppose she doesn't like to see all that wasted space. That's true. She should be living somewhere out here on a farm. Well, then you ought to buy her one, Patricia says. Look Smart laughs, taking this as a joke, but she is being quite serious. She can't help but feel a bit disappointed in the scheme of his with a farm, even if the survival of a house might please her. He seems to think that the land, which is ultimately no more than a bit of a wet bog between two hills, is the thing that needs to be worked on. Whereas the only thing that needs working on is him. Look Smart himself. Your mother must be very proud of you. Oh, yes. She always has been proud of you since you first went to boarding school. Don't I know it? She sees now that the tone regarding his mother survives in him still. It sounds like a faint echo, an almost undetectable remnant of his old self-loathing. He has the same need to diminish the earth he comes from, which is not so much the farm or even the country as it is his own flesh and blood. You know, when you first went away to that school, she finds herself saying, your mother and I would often talk about you. We would sit at the kitchen table, the back door open, the flies bumping away as usual against the glass, and I would have to read out your school reports. You would. And although she couldn't read more than a word or two, your mother would carry those reports around in her overall pocket for days afterwards. None of this is quite true. Patricia has no memory of sitting with his mother in the kitchen or even reading out his school reports. But she finds herself saying the words anyway, wanting to wake him up to his mother and to Patricia herself and to all the women who have ever loved him in his life. When I first went to school, my mother would look at me with strange eyes, with the same eyes she used when she looked at you. And by the time school was finished, I don't think I fitted anywhere. Not with her, and certainly not with you. Perhaps that's the price you had to pay, Patricia says. Perhaps it's the price we all had to pay, each one of us. She has spent her whole life watching the things that have mattered the most to her leaving her. First her mother, whom she could barely remember, then little Rachel, and then her father, who simply fell down dead one day from a heart attack. Far more subtle ways, however, there has also been her husband, her lover, and looks smart. And this has extended to the farm itself. She has watched over the birth of each foal on the farm, charted its growth, treated its very ailments, and then sold it off the moment it was ready for independence. Nothing has ever come back to her. Everything around her, and much that has been happening in the country at large, has only confirmed this, has only ever held evidence of loss or decay. But recently, she has also been observing all the new buildings starting up out of the earth, and the green crops of weeds appearing in the most improbable places. A few days ago, when she and Becky were driving into the village, she noticed a cloud of yellow butterflies hovering around the weeds and spilling over across their path. Becky drove on through them as though they weren't there, and neither of them said a word about it. But in that instant, Patricia saw that there was an altogether different way of viewing the world, as an inexhaustible source of renewal and growth. And for a few minutes, she was filled with what she could only have described as happiness. Do you think one day you will be able to come and visit? She doesn't believe he will, as she says this. She doesn't even know if she would want him to. The future is still too tenuous a place for either of them to have any say in it. At your house by the sea? Why not? She smiles. Even now, she can picture the house perfectly. It has a glass conservatory on the ground floor, looking across the lawn which seems to end at the ocean with nothing in between. Once she dreamed the whole house was made of glass, with everything transparent, so that every chair, every comb, every mote of dust could be seen from outside of it. Oh, we could take the old Rottweiler for a walk on the beach, she says. A small, bleak note already beginning to sound through her. We could throw sticks for it. Yeah, he says, laughing, and seeming to understand her exactly. We could make a jump through hoops. She would like to tell him clearly that he was like a son, at least the closest she ever got to having one, and that she will be lonely there, in a house by the sea. She would like to tell him that she wants him to visit her, even if it is just to humor a grey gorgo, with 1 or 2 marbles still rolling around inside her head. He could even bring his wife and children. There will be so many rooms standing empty. Oh, and there will be the Victorian doll's house that once belonged to her grandmother. They could sit in the glass conservatory as her father's guests had once done, drinking gin while the girls ran around the lawn playing stuck in the mud. Oh, there was even a croquet set somewhere. The whole family could play after lunch, the better for drink, as her family had often done when she was a child. But all of that feels immediately absurd. And anyway, children these days were forever playing on their phones and computers. Anything she would have to offer those 2 girls would look like nothing more than bits of old junk. She would also like to admit that she will be afraid. She will be afraid tonight when the lights of the house are off, and she is surrounded by an altogether different darkness. But she also knows that he came here, at least in part, to achieve exactly this. I'm pleased you have come, she says instead. And I'm pleased that I've come to know you a little. You know nothing about me. He says this as though he wishes it weren't true or is willing it not to be true. A few words, that is all. Sometimes a few words can be enough to show who a person is. She doesn't know what she means by this, for what kind of person is he exactly? It is more of an instruction, however, than a compliment, like his name. The golden thread that ran through him as a boy is shining through him still. Even she can see that. But she finds he's pacing the room again with an old uneasiness. Ah, madam, he tells her, this is a strange land we live in. After all this time, you still want to be the mother. And me? I must still be something like your child. But that relationship, it can have no place in the future of this country.
Patricia seems rather pleased that Looksmart has gone to so much trouble to rebuild Dwaleni. She sees it as evidence of the impact that the house, the farm, has had on him and how it has molded him. The references to Looksmart's mother are sad. Patricia's largesse, her favour, made him resent his own mother. The result is a man who feels rootless, adrift in the world. He is not sure where he belongs. This sense of homelessness has been with Looksmart for most of his life. The bond between Patricia and Looksmart is complicated, as was the bond between Looksmart and his own mother. He became a stranger to her. He looked like her son, but he sounded like one of the privileged boys at his school. Was Patricia's benevolence a gift, or was it a poisoned chalice? Have a look at Looksmart's final comment in this chapter, quote number 10. Do you agree with his statement? On page 184, we read Richard's section. Very few chapters are told from Richard's perspective, and so it's important to focus on how much is revealed in so few words. He is aware that he's not sitting in his own house. He recognizes this because Beauty is sitting comfortably on the bed, like it was hers. He knows that Beauty is caring, non-threatening, and he recognizes the cup she has offered him. He has an awareness that his body is tired, and his hands have been bleeding, but his mind is foggy. There are hints that he remembers aspects of his past, but the details elude him. There is a suggestion that his conscience might be bothering him for some monstrous thing or things he has done in the past. Take note of how often clothing imagery is associated with Richard. Here it refers to his conscience, how his guilt continues to play on his mind, even while his mind is slowly disintegrating due to dementia. We return to Beauty on page 187. Richard has rushed out into the dark and again disappeared. Beauty compares Richard to a stone thrown into a raging river at night. Becky is also missing. She is aware that inside Becky is a new thing, a new source of interest. She knows that Becky has secrets, but she cannot conceive of why he might defect. She knows that she's not a priority to Becky. We sense her awareness of being excluded, denied his heart. She's surprised to hear laughter. Beauty was expecting violence, but did nothing to prevent it. It's impossible to tell whether she's disappointed or relieved. Read through the commentary in your study guide before you answer the questions, either writing the answers in the guide or in your notebooks. Looksmart's memories of his school days are uncomfortable to read. The boys, the principal, all of them made sure that he never felt welcome, that he always felt that he was an outsider. Look Smart's marriage, like Patricia's, is not a particularly happy one. He too has had an affair. Question 4 asks us to analyze Patricia's feelings towards the changes on Dwaleni. Both of these questions find their answers in the racist past of apartheid South Africa. Looksmart's attitude towards the Rottweiler and Richard's attitude towards beauty are both rooted in prejudice. Bullies appear in all parts of society, and bullies are adults as well as children. It's part of the power structure in society. The pupils choose to align themselves with the headmaster, who has authority over them all. It's a systemic approach to entrenching the ideology of prejudice, of separatism. Looksmart had no illusions about John Ford. The religious piety of the man must have sickened Looksmart. Looksmart blames Patricia for much of the unhappiness in his life. By admitting his failures to her, he would be tying himself to her, acknowledging their shared past, their close relationship. Instead, he wishes to maintain the facade of a controlled, successful man who achieved these successes in spite of her, not because of her. The symbolism of the new housing development cannot be emphasized enough. The farmhouse is being preserved, which means that Patricia's mark, her father's mark on the land, is indelible. It also means that Looksmart's ties to Dwaleni can never be loosened. Patricia is certain that this is not a good thing. She realizes that clinging to the terrible memories of the past will not allow Looksmart to move on, to heal, to reach fulfillment, and most importantly, to find peace. There is no way that Patricia can realize her dream of a walk on the beach with Looksmart with the Rottweiler. Do you think that Patricia is tone deaf here? That she cannot truly understand the trauma that Looksmart has experienced? Even in his demented state, Richard is a racist. As I've mentioned before, I can't find anything to like in this character. I hope that you've added to your own notes as we have worked through today's passages. If you have any queries, you can contact me on the various platforms created for you. My own pupils should use Edmodo or WhatsApp. Other students should look for Mrs. M Teaches English on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. Follow my Facebook page, subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you are notified immediately when new resources are uploaded. Keep safe, everyone. Until our next lesson.